So for my talk, I'm going to relate 3 anecdotes, and these 3 anecdotes spanned the time frame of 2000 through 2018. I think many of you know that the Me Too movement actually began officially with activist Tarina Burke, who was a youth counselor in 2006, and she created Me Too as a support system for young women of color after she heard some horrific stories and felt that they needed a voice. Me Too went viral in October 2017 using social media, and at the fulcrum of this, of course, were the allegations against Harry Weinstein, Hollywood mogul. Elisa Milano is responsible, many consider her responsible for sending the Me Too movement viral over the internet. She was an AIDS activist. She was the UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador for the USA. She always had a great concern for children, and her idea with Me Too was to encourage targets and victims of sexual harassment to tweet their experiences not only as a support group, but so the rest of the world could know how pervasive this was in the workplace, the extent and to how many people this harassment affected. Later she was joined by the likes of Gwyneth Paltrow, Jennifer Lawrence, and Uma Thurman. The goal of the Me Too movement was to break the silence and complicity. Interestingly enough, USA Today reported on September 30th, 2019, that 81% of women in their lifetime and 43% of men in their lifetime have experienced some form of sexual harassment. Most of the current voices that get the most publicity with regard to the Me Too movement now involve white, cisgendered, middle, upper class people, despite, in fact, the early formation of what Tarana wanted to do to help poor women, women of color, and the LGBTQ communities. So I'm saying this because my experience in my workspace was basically white, was basically middle and upper class, and so the anecdotes that I am going to be discussing today are within that venue, but that is just a fraction of what is going on in all the other communities, and I really wanted to underscore that. I'm also very happy to relate this particular topic, not just to the map is not the territory, because actually, in my opinion, as I will describe, the Me Too movement needs a lot of maps. They need protocols. This is going to be something that is very important. But Lance created the title for this conference when he talked about the tyranny of words. And so I would like you to listen to these 3 anecdotes carefully under the concept of the tyranny of words. The first anecdote is personal. It is personal as political. This is the year 2000. I am a professor in the theater department at an upstate college. It is the end of the semester. I'm actually getting ready to leave that college and return to New York when I get a knock at my door. This is my house, not my office. My house that I rented was practically on campus. This was not unusual. And there were 2 young women at the door. One was a graduating senior, and the other was a sophomore. Both were the head of their classes. Both had done considerable work in the theater program, and so I thought they were actually coming by to say goodbye, but no, they said they had to talk to me about something very important. The graduating senior told me that she had been harassed, sexually harassed, her entire last year of college. As she began to speak, she began to shake. And she said, and I'm actually starting to shake, she said that this was her most favorite professor. He was, at the time, in his 50s. He was married, and he had children the same age she was. This student was 21. The other student who had come in with her was 19. She said he harassed her entire senior year and had completely ruined that experience, and she did not know what to do. And she was coming in now because she saw that it seemed like he was beginning to give the same type of attentions to this sophomore, and she felt she could not stand it, and therefore she was going to come forward. She said she was strategic about it because she waited till the classes had ended, the grades were in, and the recommendations were out. But she had to suffer for that particular year. She said she had no idea of who to go to, how to talk about it, because it involved no physical touching whatsoever. There was no map, there was no protocol, there was no place for her to report such an incident. What basically happened was this particular professor had invited her over to his home with the idea that he was going to give her a really interesting play for her to read. She thought nothing of it, went to his home. Instead, he had a bottle of champagne, beautiful fruit, and immediately started talking about the affair that they were going to have, and then it was to remain secret. She jumped up, immediately said that this was not her interest at all. She was not interested. She liked him very much as a professor, but no, thank you. He proceeded through the rest of the year to stalk her. At every single time that she was alone, he would walk by and say, I cannot live without you. I cannot live without you. I'm really feeling it. You're driving me crazy, etc., etc., until she reached the point where she felt she could not leave her home alone without some sort of companionship. In terms of the physical realm, he had only, in a fatherly fashion prior to this happening, had put his arm around her, like a fatherly, and he was as old as her father, or had cupped her face to tell her how wonderful her pieces were that she had directed and so forth. And at that time, she had not thought anything of it, but this is what had happened. And so now, since she knew that I was leaving, and she knew so there would be no repercussions for me, she was a very smart woman to have to deal with all of these different things, she said, now I'm going to speak, now I need to report it. But both she and the sophomore said to me, we like him very much. We see his wife every once in a while around the campus, and we do not want any harm to come to him. We do not want any harm to come to his family. We want you, because we know you're his friend, we want you to give him a good talking to so he will never do it again. I had been listening with horror. I was appalled. I did not question them. They would have no reason to come out with something like this. They had gotten all the roles. They had gotten everything. They were straight-A students. It wouldn't have mattered had they not been, but I'm just saying there would be no motivation for any of this to happen. I did not, obviously, I had not talked to the male professor, and I am trying to think of what to do. I think the first thing that hit me was dismay, disheartened in the sense of how could this have happened? How could we have let these students down? Why was there no protocol? Why did she not feel safe to go to some other place? Why was there not something for professors to know they cannot do such a thing? Again, the year was 2000. And what am I going to do with this person who had a male friend, who had befriended me, taken my part in some difficult issues, and was probably the best liked professor in the entire theater and English department? And then I finally, after I sat there for a second, I finally said to them, I cannot have a private discussion with him. You have reported it to me. I cannot have a private discussion with him. This is something that is too large for me to handle, and it would not be fair to you, to anybody else. And I didn't say what I really thought, that maybe he would never listen, he would brush it off, nothing would happen. I just said that it was too large for me to handle. I had to go to the program head. I called the program head. I went in later that afternoon, I went in later that afternoon, and I told the program head the story. He first said, "This is ridiculous. I don't believe you. Why would this happen? But we will call him in." So he calls and you will confront him. And he said, "And by the way, I'm going to call up the student." And I said, "She said she's ready. You can call the student." And he paused and said, "That's okay. You'll confront him." So then here's my friend coming in, and I just repeated the story that I said, and he said, "Oh, there was a mistake. I never did such a thing. There was a mistake. I did not do this." And then I said to both of them, "Well, there was a role you refused to play. And this role was Paula Vogel's How I Learned to Drive. And the program director had asked you a number of times to play the lead in this. And this is a story of an older man who sexually takes advantage of a younger woman he's teaching how to drive." And all of a sudden, he broke down and started crying. And he said, "But I never touched her, but I never touched her, but I never touched her. I was just so lonely. My wife was in England a lot. I never touched her. I never touched her. I only told her how much I cared about her. I only told her how much I cared about her and how I wanted her." And so as a result, he was suspended for a year. He did not come back for a year. I did not return to the university as I was going. I did check back later on. He, in fact, had been reinstated after the year he had been suspended. So fast forward, and I don't have too much time anymore, but 3 minutes. All right, fast forward to the 2008 Hillary Clinton campaign. Hillary Clinton had protocols in place for people to make complaints, either for discrimination, sexual harassment. A 30-year-old aide brought a complaint to Hillary Clinton. It went through the proper channels. It turned out to be Hillary Clinton's pastor of 35 years. He had shoulder massaged her when she didn't want to. He had kissed her on the forehead, and he had sent her a string of emails and suggestive emails, and one at night. He went through the hearing. Hillary fined him. She ordered him to counseling, and she made sure that he would have no contact with this aide, who was moved to another department. Fast forward to 2018. The New York Times, after the Me Too movement, decided to publish an article that was titled, "Hillary Clinton Shields Top Advisor from Harassment." Their complaint was that she did not punish him enough, and that when she was asked about it, she used the word dismayed. Following that, 3 days after that article, Ruth Marcus got on the airways. She wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post, and she said, "How dare Hillary address this in this way? How dare she hardly give her any punishment? And how dare she use the word dismay? How dare you use the word dismay? If I was that parent, I would be," this is a 30-year-old woman, right? It's not an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old. "If I was the parent, I would want to rip his head off. I think women should go ballistic. We need to go ballistic now." 2 points I want to make from these scenarios. To be dismayed means that you are so disheartened you are at a loss. It's a signal reaction because you cannot immediately take action. You can maybe recover from it, like I did, and thought for a second and moved on. But to be dismayed would be disheartened. I empathize with Hillary on that one, after a 35-year-old and 35 years with a pastor, and then doing that. Secondly, to go ballistic. I get what Ruth Marcus was saying. She was saying, we cannot be victims. We cannot just fold. We have to stand up. But to go ballistic is a signal reaction too. To go ballistic, if you take a look at it, means a loss of control due to anger. When we make our decisions and look for the maps, to take care of all the different territories of the Me Too. We cannot waste our capital over going ballistic or being dismayed. We need to find guidelines and maps to promote education and healing and to make a safe place for every woman, no matter what position in her life, to be able to stand up and say, this has happened and I want justice. One more thing about Al Franken. Interestingly enough, even though Ruth Marcus said Hillary should have gone ballistic, Ruth Marcus defended Al Franken and said that he felt that he was not a Roy Moore and that we have to be careful that we don't do one broad brushstroke for everyone, and that Al Franken should have been able to have gotten a fair hearing, even though the result may have been the same. So I thought all of these anecdotes were very interesting because they were emotionally driven, all of them, and maybe did not have the best result for all of them. Thank you.